Good evening, everybody. Joining us for our second athletics town hall. We appreciate you being here. We know you got some questions that we will try our best to get to as fast as we can. First, we're going to go through our panel of people here that want to say something to you before we get into the questions. We know several of you submitted questions beforehand, and we hopefully will answer those here in the first few minutes, and then we will take questions after that. So first, we're joined here by the same three people that we were over the last time: our Director of Athletics, Terry Bozel, our Associate Director of Athletics, Doug Aiken, and our Director of Sports Medicine, Pam Gibbons. And they will all have a short little thing to say to you before we get into the questions. So with that, I will throw it straight over to Coach Bozel, who I know has been hard at work on everything that's been going on and everything that's been constantly evolving with this situation. So Coach Bozel, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Stephen. Hey, I appreciate everybody being here for our second town hall. Unfortunately, I wish I could have better information for you, but the state of the country and in particular the state of California is not allowing that for right now. But first of all, I want to thank Doug Aiken, our Associate AD, who's going to talk a little bit about your academic eligibility and compliance, and Pam Gibbons, our Director of Sports Medicine and Athletic Training, who will talk about medical paperwork and any type of testing protocols that you may have. And then obviously Stephen Olveda, our Sports Information Director, who's moderating this. So appreciate everybody taking the time this evening to be with us. But, you know, what's our current decision? How do we get here? You know, on March 11th, as I stood in front of the spring sport athletes and told them that their season had been canceled, never did I dream that I'd be doing the same thing to our fall sport athletes here almost the 1st of August. But unfortunately, that's what I'm here to tell you is that as of last Thursday, I believe, the SCIAC conference has made the decision to cancel all of our fall sports up and through December 31st of 2020. The sports that are high risk, which is men's and women's soccer, football, volleyball, men's water polo, and men's and women's basketball. So men's and women's basketball is a little bit different, is that their season hasn't been canceled necessarily. It's been pushed back at least until a start date of January 1. The low-risk sports of men's and women's cross country, men's and women's golf, men's and women's tennis, and men's and women's swimming right now is still, we're on a go as long as we are in residence, taking classes on campus. And the status of that right now is shaky at best as well. Right now, we're expecting that the governor will start us remotely. We still haven't heard the guidance from the state or the governor's office, but we're anticipating that we'll start remotely. And anytime we're going to be remote, we will not be able to participate in any athletic-related activities on campus. With that being said, we're very optimistic with everything that we've put in place with our CU Safely Back plan that we may be able to get switched to residential learning. And at that point, if that happens, then we'll be able to get back into our facilities. Our coaches will be able to start working with their athletes on a much smaller scale. It'll probably be small group instruction, some strength and conditioning activities. But we'll see what the governor's orders are as far as the number of people that's allowed in a group at that point. So I want to repeat that as long as we are remote, we will not have any athletic related activities because our campus will still be closed. So that kind of puts us in a predicament. You know, what do I do? Do I come down to campus? Do I stay at home? Well, that's going to be a personal decision, but I do know today that our president and senior staff made the decision to move forward with a plan to house a reduced population of students in our Chapman residence halls and Chapman housing. That is going to be reduced to private bedrooms and a private bath per individual. So there's only going to be one person to a room. A big question I've been getting is, what does that mean for athletics? Does that do athletes get priority to that housing? The correct word, I would not use priority, but I would use extra consideration. So it does make a difference. So if you are emailing our Residence Life group and requesting housing, it does help to say what sport you're in, and it might give you a leg up. I think Steven's going to post it, but I'll give it to you that the best way to get a hold of our Residence Life staff is not one person in particular, because if that person's busy, you could be delayed for a few hours. But if you'll email reslife, RESLIFE at chapman.edu, there's a group of people that's going to be answering those emails, and you might be able to get an answer back to you a little bit quicker. I want to repeat about our facilities. As long as we stay remote, I would anticipate our athletic facilities remaining closed. If we get back to on-campus classes, then I think we'll be able to get some of our facilities back up and running. So what does that mean for our fall sports as we lead into the spring? I just got off a call this morning with the SCIAC conference office, and we're just now starting to explore options for the spring and what that may look like for our fall sports. We're anticipating that the Division III NCAA offices will make an announcement that they will not conduct fall championships for any of our sports in the fall. We were expecting that last Friday. It was delayed, and they're meeting again on August 4th. But right now, I think Coach Aiken and I counted, there may be 7 conferences remaining out of 34 that has not canceled fall sports up to this point. So a fall championship is looking very unlikely. So it's still early to tell what our spring competition could look like. But we're going to work through that throughout the fall and see if we can come up with something that's going to be worthwhile for a student to be on campus and working out and possibly competing in the spring. What does winter and spring sports look like? We already talked a little bit about basketball getting pushed back to January 1. Right now, swimming, who's considered a winter sport, is still on the to-go list right now, but that could change at any minute. And then our spring sports is kind of wait and see. We're scheduling as normal, but again, none of us have any idea where this pandemic is going to go, or where it's going to end and what it looks like. As you can see, many of you follow professional sports. You've seen Major League Baseball, had a setback with the Miami Marlins, being canceled up through Sunday now because they had 13 or 17 cases that popped up. So this thing is still very much alive and well, and we'll be challenged to get back up and running, but we're going to do our best. And I also want to rest assured that all the work that senior staff and all the 18 task force did for the return to see you safely back that's still first and foremost for us. So if we are able to get back on campus, I want to rest assured that we'll be taking every precaution necessary to keep your son or daughter safe as they get back into their athletic activities and participation. I think I'll stop there, because rather than rambling, I'd rather have Doug and Pam talk and then address any questions that you guys may have as we get into the conversations a little bit more. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Associate AD, Doug Aiken.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate all your leadership and hard work behind the scenes these last several months. It has been a challenge, as we all know, and we are working hard and doing our best to evaluate each situation, each day that goes by, and also to try to come up with, like Coach said, safe but also meaningful possible athletic experience for our student athletes, especially. We feel for all of our student athletes, especially the seniors that don't that have a big question mark surrounding this potentially final year for you guys, and also for the incoming freshmen. That this is not exactly what you guys have signed up for with this college experience. You guys missed your high school graduation, and now your college career is going to get off to this start. So we feel for you. We absolutely do. I'm going to talk about things kind of from an NCAA compliance standpoint. A few things have come up in recent weeks that I want to share with you all. As far as the use of athletic eligibility for our fall athletes, and as Coach said, this is a big contingent placed on whether we are having classes on campus or not. Because if we're not having classes on campus, then we're not having any athletic participation in person and small group workouts even. So, but what our coaches have been working on and what we've talked about is the ability to have virtual workouts, virtual workout sessions, team meetings, chalk talk type things that will all count as athletically related activities, even if virtual. The NCAA came out with guidelines. Normally, each sport is allowed an 18 or 19 week season that they're allowed to participate in Division III. The bulk of that happens in what we call the traditional season. So football, volleyball might have a 14-week traditional season that includes all of their preseason practices all the way up through their last game of the year. And then they might have 3 or 4 weeks of non-traditional practice in the spring. Well, since we will not have a fall season, a traditional season in that regard, the NCAA has actually changed that week to 114 days, and those days will be able to be spread out at each coach's discretion throughout the course of the year. So we will not have a traditional and non-traditional, although the bulk of those days may fall in a more traditional sense. One student athlete working out with one coach does constitute a day. So even small group workouts or individual workouts will count towards those 114 days. So the coaches will have to kind of navigate that with our student athletes to try to figure out and determine how they'll use those days most effectively. And so again, our hope is that we can have student athletes back on campus this semester, pending the state allowance. And in that case, we will be able to, even though we will not have a traditional season in the fall, we will be able to maybe have some small group workouts, individual workouts, and some athletically related activity. And so that will go towards that. Now, key to the eligibility question is the NCAA has ruled and basically offered a blanket waiver for any program and any student athlete that's in a program where the amount of games, say we just practice, only practice, play no games, or even if we play a few games, but it's less than or 50% of what the maximum allowed dates of competition are. So in football, they're allowed 10. So if they played 5 games or less, or soccer is allowed 20. If they play 10 games or less, and we're talking about if this all were to happen in the spring, which is a big if, those student athletes would maintain that year of eligibility. They would not use or trigger the use of a year of eligibility. And so you would still, if you're a senior, you would still have your senior year. If you're a freshman, you would still come back and be a freshman the next year, almost like a red shirt at the Division I or Division II level, where you would not be charged with that year of eligibility. So there is the potential to have some sort of meaningful athletically related season come springtime, and if it's at 50% or below that maximum allowed dates of competition, you would still maintain that year of eligibility, which is good news. Also, those student athletes in those programs that are 50% or less would also get an additional 2 full-time semesters added on to their what is normally 10 full-time semesters to use your 4 years of eligibility. So you could be actually enrolled for 12 full-time semesters And that's if you're part of a program that's at 50% or less of the maximum allowed dates. Now, our NCAA will allow teams to start to come back, our fall teams to start to have practices starting August 10th. Now, because we won't be back on campus August 10th, that will have to happen virtually, but our coaches have been given a green light, if our fall coaches anyway, if they want to start incorporating some team virtual workouts or virtual meetings starting August 10th. Our winter and spring sports are August 31st, which is the first day of school, and basketball has remained unchanged at October 1st. Still encourage our student athletes to sign up for the team activity classes. That's a 1-unit class for our fall sports. So all of our fall sports that offer a team class, which is a physical activity, 1 unit. Encourage you guys to continue to do that because you will probably still have, coaches will still have things for you to do, to participate in online, virtually, that will allow you to get the grade. The bulk of your season may still happen in the spring, but for now, that we're still planning on offering those classes in the fall for our traditional fall sports. That's all I will have, but I know there will be questions about, you know, taking a semester off, things like that. I'll let Stephen ask those questions and let you guys ask those questions. So for now, we'll turn things over to Pam Gibbons.
Hello, thanks for joining. I'm just going to go over some things real quickly, not as in detail as Coach Bozel and Coach Aiken, but you still need to complete your medical eligibility. The deadline is August 1st, although I understand that there are some concerns about that. It is a soft deadline. So I would like for you to get as much of your medical eligibility done by August 1st. And then if you have issues with getting an in-person physical, then that's something that could be done later on down the road. You will need to have all of your medical eligibility completed and be cleared to play to participate in these virtual workouts. So if your intention is to start August 10th, it's really important that you get those things done because you need to be cleared to be able to participate in these virtual workouts. You need to be cleared to be eligible for secondary insurance, and you need to be cleared to be eligible for athletic training services because myself and my staff will be available to the student athletes that are participating in those virtual workouts. So where can you find the physical form? That is embedded in the tutorial, which is on the athletics website and has been emailed out to all of the student athletes. There have been a number of student athletes whose request to join SWOL has been rejected, and that's because they're not using Chapman email addresses, so it's important to use your Chapman email address. The impact, that requirement is for everybody now, and it will be done remotely. I just have not sent that information out. So you may have everything else finished, you're still not cleared to play until you complete that impact requirement, and I hope to get that out early next week. I look at every single thing that is submitted, and so it takes time. You may have forms that haven't been accepted or something that hasn't been checked off. Please don't email me and ask me about that until I ask you to do so. It's just one more email I have to go through, and it delays me getting through everything else. Forms are being rejected. They're being rejected because they have not been completed as instructed in the tutorial. You know, if you have 17 pages and you upload them individually, I'm not going to look at them because that is way too much time. So upload them as I've asked as single PDF, and you know, there's a number of the reasons why it would be rejected, but that happens quite frequently. As far as campus housing, I know a lot of you are asking me about, I don't have my address for on-campus housing yet. Can I still complete my forms? Absolutely. On the forms, just leave that blank. And then when you get your campus housing information, go ahead and update Sportswear or SWOL with that information. You don't have to worry about putting it on the forms right now. And then sickle cell, it does need to be completed in either providing test results are opting out. Some of you have had the labs done and are waiting for results. Those can be uploaded separately once those results become available. So I think I've covered most of the questions that have been fairly common questions. I'm going to pass it on back to Stephen, and I will answer some specific questions in the chat.
All right, thanks to Terry, Doug, and Pam for all of that. We'll get into some questions. I know we've got them all coming in fast, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. And I think the biggest one Doug actually kind of called out himself for that we'll probably go to right away is eligibility for in the spring. If you decide to take a fall semester off, are you eligible to work in team workout and team workouts? And if you take the fall semester off and come back in the spring, would you be able to participate in a spring sport, whether that be the fall sport in the spring or track and field, for instance, being in the spring?
Yes. So students that take the fall semester off are not enrolled at all will still be eligible when they come back in the spring. And so there is no worry there. However, if you are not enrolled, you would not be allowed to participate in any team athletically related activities. So anything that were to happen, even virtually, or if we do get back on campus, any team activities, individual or small group workouts, you would not be eligible to participate in those while you are not enrolled, or even if you were only enrolled part-time, you would not be eligible for that. Must be enrolled full-time in order to participate in team-related activities. But you would be eligible to come back. Now, there was another question, I believe, that was submitted ahead of time about what if I took classes at a different institution in the fall. You would still be eligible in the spring to come back. We just want to make sure that that you're in order to maintain eligibility for next year, that you're on track, keeping pace with what's our requirement for 24 units, that you pass 24 units over the course of the academic year. And that starts August 31st and will go all the way through next summer, that you have to pass 24 units with a cum GPA of 2.0 in order to be eligible the next year. But as we certify our student athletes that are coming back for the 2021 year on August 31st, if you're eligible August 31st, you're eligible come springtime.
Doug, another one that just came through, a clarification on that blanket waiver. That is through the whole year, or is that just for the fall athletes? The blanket waiver being the 50%, is that for fall, winter, and spring? And the question goes on to ask if there will be any consideration put into a grad school application for a student that still has a year of eligibility.
That's a great question. Yes, it is for all sports for the entire 2021 year. So in anticipation that sports down the road in the winter and spring could also be canceled or affected in some way, reduced to less than a 50% schedule, you would still be allowed. So all student athletes are eligible for this if they don't meet the 50%. Or if they don't compete in more than 50% of what's allowed. So that's that's 2 semesters and 1 year of eligibility.
Thanks, Doug. Staying along these lines, I don't know, Doug, if you want to take this one, if we just send it to Terry. If you take the semester off, do you have to re-enroll or reapply to the university?
Coach, I could take that. If you've been admitted, or if you're in school right now, as long as you take 1 semester off, you're fine. But if you take a whole year off, then it's a reapplication process back into the university. So 1 semester is okay. a complete year, you'd have to reapply.
Thanks, Terry. We'll stick with you. If a clarification again on, I think what was kind of mentioned earlier, if student athletes are allowed to live on campus, will facilities be available to them as far as the pool and the weight room?
If we are not back taking classes on campus, then we're considered remote, and that answer is no. There will be no facilities open at this point. So the only way the facilities will be able to open up is if we are back doing some type of live in-class, in-person instruction back on Chapman's campus. Stephen, let me go ahead. I know that's confusing because you're thinking, hey, if I'm on campus and I'm in housing, why can't anything else be open? But that's kind of what the governor's stance is right now. That could change as we get closer, or as things lessen up here in California, in Orange County in particular. But there's a very good I'm not going to say good possibility. There's a possibility that as we start remote and we come off the county watch list for 14 consecutive days, then at that point we can immediately start doing some in-person instruction, which means in-person training at that point. So as the trend starts to go in the positive direction, we could get back on campus after a 14-day period.
Thanks, Coach. A couple questions came through about teams that train off campus. Namely, I can think of golf off the top of my head. Will they still be allowed? I mean, they would still fall under the same rules as every other sport, that we have to be back on campus in order to train as a team.
Correct. There's nothing that we could say to stop them from let's say going down to Tustin Ranch and signing up if that's open. But Coach Lau, our golf coach, would not be able to participate in any of those workouts at that time.
Right. Thanks, Coach. And then question really quick about club sports. Would club sports fall under do they follow the same rules as NCAA sports? I know the eligibility requirements as far as the NCAA rulings are going to be different, but do the club sports kind of fall along the same line, or do you know anything about specifically men's lacrosse?
I won't talk about their academic eligibility on that, but I will talk about the same scenario. If we are not back in class on campus, there will be no sports allowed, club or NCAA sports allowed on campus using our facilities or anything like that. But the same thing would be, Coach Hartley would be able to provide some virtual training, guidance, video, anything he wants to do that from afar, but nothing on campus in person.
And then we'll stick with you still. A question about the capacity of the facilities. If everything is moved to the spring, if fall sports are allowed to compete in the spring alongside the spring sports, do Chapman's facilities have the capacity to, I guess, handle all that traffic?
That's a big concern for all of us, not just Chapman, but everybody in the SCIAC and all the Division IIIs that I've been in contact with throughout the country. Is at the Division III level, multiple sports use the same facility, unlike sometimes at Division I. So the challenge would be facility usage. Another challenge would be personnel. You've got 21 sports trying to compete in the spring season and still only 4 athletic trainers. How are we dividing that up? We've got 1 sports information office. How are we covering all those sports? So there are a number of challenges that come with that. Not to say it's going to be easy, but that's what we're going to work to look at and work through from now till January 1 to see the logistics of that and if it's feasible and doable. Great question, though. Yeah.
Thanks, Coach. Doug, we're going to go back to you for a sec. Do students have to be enrolled full-time in order to participate in virtual team workouts, or can they be enrolled part-time at Chapman? I know they have to be enrolled at least 1 credit, but do they have to be enrolled full-time?
For it to be part of the 114-day team season, they do need to be enrolled full-time. The exceptions to that, which have been unchanged, there are exceptions for our seniors that if they're in their final semester. So if we have a spring athlete that's set to graduate in the spring and they only need 1 class in order to meet their graduation requirement, they are allowed to participate as a part-time student. That's the only exception for that part-time to be able to participate. So yes, you have to be enrolled full-time. Now, could part-time students, work out separate from the team, separate from coach supervision? Absolutely. But for it to be involved with the team, for it to be mandated or expected from the coaches, they have to be enrolled full-time.
Thanks, Doug. A lot of questions still coming in for clarification on taking a semester off, taking a year off. If it's at the end of the student's career academically and they graduate, what would it take to get another year, especially for those winter sports that span both semesters? And when would somebody have to make a decision to either defer enrollment to the spring semester or have to come in the fall?
Good questions. In order to, you'll get your extra year or your extra semester. Our spring athletes from the spring 2020 received an extra semester of eligibility along with an extra year. Anyone this year that's impacted by COVID would get an extra year and 2 semesters. But you might not need to, might not have the classes to fill that. And so in order to come back, what we always tell student athletes that want to use that last year of eligibility, but maybe they're set to graduate a semester ahead of time. So a fall athlete that maybe was set to graduate this spring, but wants to come back and play this fall, they need to just save basically one class that's required for their graduation in order to take that during their semester of eligibility, that final semester, and they would be eligible to play. So those questions and those situations can be very nuanced, and so I'm happy to field any questions. Please send me an email. I'll share it in the chat as well. But it's DAIKEN@chapman.edu, and I'm happy to have conversations with student athletes about potential scenarios that would allow them to get that extra year of eligibility. Winter athletes, it's a little bit tougher because they do span over 2 semesters, and so they would need to be full-time in the first, if they want to use both semesters and their full year of eligibility, they'd need to be full-time in the fall and taking classes, towards graduation, and then they can be part-time in the spring in order to complete that full year of eligibility. I did not answer the question earlier that you asked, Stephen, about graduate school, and I do want to comment on that real quick, that you absolutely could use your eligibility as a grad student. And so if that's an option for you, or picking up a second major, something along those lines to, kind of help you stay enrolled and prolong your career, are all options, and I'm happy to discuss those with any student that is in that situation.
And some more questions about residence life in particular. If students come back on campus and you're living in the dorm, even if classes are not in person, will the cafeteria be open? Will food be available for them? If a student decides not to come back right away, if this campus opens on time, as far as the residence part, and then once we get off the watch list and practices start, if that student doesn't have housing, or will they be able to enroll in housing at that point, or will they be able to get housing somehow, or are they given some sort of priority? Coach Bozel, do you want to try to take that one?
Sure. Let's go the first part first as far as food. If the residence halls are open, there will be food supplied by our food services cafeteria. It may not be what they're used to seeing. It could be a grab and go, but there will be food supplied by Sodexo for the residence halls. The second part is if you're not down here in housing and all of a sudden we're back on campus and you want to try to get housing, I think the only way that would be feasible is if there are still spaces available in our residence halls, and know that the reduction has been quite severe, going, I want to say, from almost the first cut was down to 2,900 beds. I think the last cut to provide single bed, single bathroom for each person goes down to about 1,700 beds. So if for some reason you're away and you try to come back once classes start, it might be very hard to get housing, not only on campus, but to find something off campus as well.
If a student decides to defer for an entire year and wants to reapply, will their financial aid package be guaranteed, or even a semester? Will the financial aid package be guaranteed still? Will admission be guaranteed, or is there any sort of influence in the fact that they are a student athlete? Coach Bozel, you want to take that one again?
One semester deference is much different than a full year. If you go one semester, I think your financial aid is good. I don't want to speak 100%, but I think your financial aid will be the same, what it would be, because basically what you do when you get a financial aid package, you get split in half from the fall and spring. So I think whatever you were going to get for a semester, you would still get in the spring. If you defer for an entire year and you have to reapply, then it'll be just like your financial aid packages are different year to year based on the previous year's income tax or your situation. So it might not look exactly the same as it did this year, but it could be not because of your deferment, but because of your financial situation with your parents' jobs. And maybe if you're in a situation where your parents have been negatively impacted, your financial aid package might even be better the following year. So it's just hard to say what your financial aid package will look like for sure.
Coach, I'll add to that. My conversation with financial aid, they are encouraging any family that is currently going through a change in financial situation to apply for appeal. And they have a website that's dedicated just for those appeals. But I'll post that. Stephen, can I post a link in the chat, and will they see that? Do you know?
You should be able to.
I will share this, and anybody that this applies to, I'll encourage you guys to appeal to financial aid.
Pam, I saw you answer this one in the chat privately, I think, but I think it'd be good for you probably to answer in public about testing for COVID once athletes return to campus. Will they be tested? How often will they be tested once they get back if we are working out in some sort of a group setting?
So that's a great question. The CU Safely Back has outlined a very rigorous testing, screening, and tracing protocol. So all students, not just student athletes, but all students will be tested prior to coming to campus. Testing will be available on campus to students who have either been exposed to someone who is COVID positive or experiencing the signs and symptoms of COVID. We will also be asking all of the campus community to adhere to a daily screening in which they will identify whether or not they are experiencing any signs of COVID, and if they are, they'll be directed appropriately and individuals who are experiencing any sort of illness are going to be encouraged to stay home. Student athletes will be additionally screened with temperature checks. They'll be screened prior to competitions, should we have competitions. And so I am confident that we will be able to keep our student athletes safe as long as they adhere to the guidelines that we set forth and minimize their interaction and socialization outside of the campus community.
Thank you, Pam. One question we got earlier in the day that we haven't covered yet, I don't think, is a student athlete that might have a class they want to take during their traditional practice time that they had blocked out for practice. Obviously, that's not going to happen, at least initially. Should student athletes sign up for classes during that practice time that they thought they were going to have, or should they plan on having that practice at some point this semester? Coach Aiken, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I would say most likely yes, but that's probably a conversation that you'll want to have with your coach before you do that. Just because, again, the coaches are going to be trying to figure out how to utilize those 114 days, and even though it may not, they may or may not happen at the same times as when the normal practices would be, they may still happen in a sense or in a way that would conflict with the class. But I definitely think it opens up some possibilities to add some classes, considering that we will not have as much time for our coaches to spend with athletes while we're remote, but just have that conversation with your coach.
Thanks, Doug. For spring athletes, should they be trying to get into housing right now as well? Should they take that kind of priority route that you talked about a little bit earlier? Are we talking more about fall athletes kind of being shown maybe a little bit of priority in trying to get housing? Coach Bosley, you want to take that one?
No, I think spring athletes need to go ahead and let people know they're an athlete as well, because as Coach Aiken stressed, it's changed. The traditional, non-traditional season's changed a little bit now. So if you're a spring athlete, you may be able to do a little bit more than you usually do in the fall because of those 114 days. So it's not reserved just for fall. If I'm a spring athlete, I'm emailing housing and letting them know that that I participate in athletics as well, and maybe that could help them out.
Coach, we're going to go back. We talked about golf a little bit earlier, but kind of more wide reaching, I guess. Softball, baseball, they're all facilities that are controlled by the city rather than being on Chapman's campus. Will those athletes have those facilities available to them, even if we are in full virtual mode for the learning portion of learning?
We're talking about two distinctly different types of facilities. One, Tustin Ranch. It's a public golf course, and anybody can go up and try to get on if they're open. But again, it'd be without any coach instruction or any Chapman affiliation. When you're talking about Hart Park for baseball and El Camino Park for softball, even though those are city parks, they're still reserved for Chapman athletes. So you might be hard pressed to be able to get on those parks without having the access to your coaches or having your coaches' permission to get on those. So I think Hart Park and El Camino would be hard to get on. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm not sure the city has given any permits to individuals without some type of an affiliation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Hopefully to all of you out there, it does as well. Those are Chapman, not Chapman properties necessarily, but they are controlled by Chapman, and so you probably need a coach in order to get on to those facilities because they're going to be locked up otherwise. One thing that we've come across that we wanted to talk about was the work study award. I don't know if we've touched on that one yet. If an athlete has a work study award that is usually filled in team activities, in laundry or what have you, will they still have that award available to them? If we're in full virtual mode, will they have it available as soon as we get back to do something along those lines?
I can answer that. conversation with financial aid is if there's worry that if we start remote, you would lose your work study package, that should not be a worry. If you are awarded work study as part of your financial aid package, that will not change dependent on whether we're remote or not. However, if we don't have student athletes on campus, we don't have events on campus, we cannot guarantee jobs for our student athletes, as we've never been able to guarantee, but we have definitely tried to provide work opportunities for student athletes that are awarded work study, and that will obviously be impacted as we will not have the job opportunities, the hours, and so would encourage you to look elsewhere on campus for any job opportunities if that's going to be an important part of your experience this year.
And just to add to that, Coach, is that could be for fall where we don't have any activities, but if we then turn around and we're fully go in the spring, some of that financial aid work study would be able to be moved to the spring semester, and you'd be able to get paid for any jobs that you're hired for, event management, laundry, front office desk, whatever shall may be. So you've got a full year to get a portion of that work study money used up.
Pam, again, something you answered in the chat, but I think maybe relevant to everybody on their mind about the COVID test. Is it part of their physical requirement as part of their medical eligibility paperwork? And how do they get one? Will it be done on campus, or should they secure that before they get to campus privately?
It is not part of the physical requirement. It will be part of the Chapman requirement to return to campus. Currently, the way that it is outlined in the CU Safely Back is that everyone in the campus community will receive a mail-in test that they will be required to complete, and then that will be returned to campus or returned to the lab, right? And then campus health center will then get those results, and that will occur no more than 2 weeks prior to our return to campus. And so that's something you get in the mail. You do the test at home, you put it back in the mail and mail it in, and then you and the campus would get those results. Does that answer the question, Stephen, or is there more?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Sorry, slow fingers trying to unmute.
Yeah, no,
if there's any, I think we've gotten to most of the questions so far, but we do have a few more minutes. If there was something that was unanswered that you would like to see answered, or if I missed something in the chat that any of you guys want to cover. There was a question about tryouts for anybody that came in that was looking to try out when they got to campus. Maybe they weren't necessarily recruited. If you're looking to try out for a sport and you're not recruited, you're not in contact with the coach, you should get in contact with the coach of that sport right away and talk to them about what your opportunities could be. Coach Bozo, did you have something?
No, that was perfect. That's what I would suggest. Get in contact with the coach and start at that point. Yes. Stephen, one thing I want to address a little bit is even prior to getting back on campus, and then for sure once you get back on campus, we're all going to be responsible for how this thing goes. So we're going to need you as students to take all the precautions seriously and do the social distancing and do the face coverings and the sanitation and the health screenings and be honest with your reported symptoms. Because as I talked about earlier, you can see with the Miami Marlins, it just takes 1 or 2 people and it spreads very rapidly. So in order for us to make this work and be able to stay together, not only as an athletic community, but as a Chapman community, we need everybody to take this serious and do their part. And it's hard because we feel like we can police you a little bit while you're under our care, under our coaches' care. But once you leave our care and you're out at night in social gatherings and in the dorm rooms and at houses, we can't control that, and we need you guys to step up and do that, or this thing will never work. So we need buy-in from everybody, faculty, staff, students, everybody that's involved in order for us to minimize this and get this thing to go away as soon as possible. We need everybody to buy in.
Coach, we're just going to stay with you. A couple of questions about tuition. I think I could probably answer this, but I'll let you do it anyway. Is there a tuition discount if we're going to remote learning? If it's completely remote, will tuition be discounted for students?
I'm probably not the most qualified person to answer this, probably is out of our area, athletics, but from my understanding is that there will not be a reduction in tuition because they're still planning on getting back in campus as soon as possible. The university has invested a lot of money in the remote learning tools that's going to be provided for faculty to use. So there's, like I said, I think they said up to this point there's been like $11 million invested in this COVID crisis up to this point, and a big portion of that is IS&T and all the gadgets that they're going to be using to help with the quality of instruction delivered remotely. That's probably about as good as answer as I'm qualified to give at this point.
What about locker rooms? If we are able to get back, if Orange County gets off the watch list and we're able to get back to a full in-person learning, at least or some sort of in-person learning on campus, will locker rooms be available as the pool and the weight room and the facilities come back open?
As of right now, the locker rooms will still be off limits. As we get into maybe our small group workouts and our strength and conditioning, and to see how things go, and if things go in a positive direction, then maybe we could look into opening up locker rooms down as they first come back to campus to do any type of athletic related activity. The locker rooms will still be closed.
Before we end here, let's circle back to housing. Still some questions kind of clarifying on housing. Should fall athletes, spring athletes, should they be trying to get housing right now, with uncertainty of whether we're going to be able to get back on campus or not?
I've already answered a lot of those questions individually throughout the last couple of weeks, so I'm going to go ahead and give the answer that I gave those individual parents and students, and that is, it's really an individual decision. It's if you don't feel like we're going to come out of, it's kind of like rolling the dice a little bit. If you don't feel like we're going to come out of the remote learning and you don't want to invest the money in the housing, then my best advice is to go with that. If you feel like, I had one parent that said, I don't care if we're remote the all semester, but for my daughter's mental health, I need to get her out of my house and down into Orange some way. So she was going to do her best to get her daughter either in residence halls or in an apartment. And so those are all individual decisions. And I sure don't want to give advice one way or another and have it be the wrong decision for your family. But it is a little bit of the roll of the dice, and it's something that I apologize for until we get further guidance and clearance on what we're going to do over the next week or so.
Probably the last question here. When do we expect to have another update? Do we expect to have another update in terms of when the campus is going to reopen, or if we're going to know if people are going to be allowed in the residence halls or not? Updates on winter and spring sports, if they're going to be full seasons, if they're going to be still cut short. When do we expect some of those updates, and how will we be able to get that to the student athletes as soon as possible?
My biggest advice is to continue to watch for the presidential updates. That'll be the quickest way. And those come out every Tuesday and Friday at 2 o'clock. And the first thing I'm expecting an update on is guidance from the governor. One is, are we allowed to be in person to start? We're anticipating remote, but maybe we'll get a break and it'll be in person. The second thing will be a definite on the housing. Chapman just felt this morning that they had to make the decision to move forward with the private room, private bath call because we couldn't wait any longer. That could all change if the governor comes back and says no resident living at all on college campuses. So that will be the second thing that comes out. And a little bit about the sports seasons. I think that will be a little bit of a time before we sort through what a fall sport in the spring could look like, if it's feasible that we do it, and kind of what's decided between the 9 SCIAC institutions on how they want to move forward.
And Coach, we're going to stay with that for the fall team or teams that are competing in the fall. I think that the update will probably come with whether the institution is completely virtual or not, but can you clarify on that for the teams that can compete in the fall that were left open to that chance, golf, cross country, and tennis? When should they know if they are actually going to compete or if their seasons are going to join the rest of the sports in the fall?
Yeah, you're right, Stephen. The first thing that it needs to do is what the governor's orders are on if we're back, if we're remote or we're back in a hybrid situation on campus. And we'll continue to move forward with that. Another bit determines on what some of our SCIAC colleagues do. As we've made the decision, I don't know, a month and a half ago, that as long as 4 institutions were able to compete, we would continue to hold competition and championships in that sport. And so it could be out of our control if some of our SCIAC colleagues go by the wayside in those sports. Right now, I know that there is at least 3 that are not having any sports at all in the fall. It could be a 4th, and my understanding just on this call, there could be a 5th. So we're getting down to that 4 number in a hurry. So as soon as we know as an institution, we'll let the coaches know, who will then immediately reach out to the athletes and their families, letting them know if hey, we're a go or we're not. But it's such a tenuous situation on a daily basis, hourly basis, that we're moving forward with those sports that we mentioned, the low impact sports, until it moves in a different direction, and I can't give a specific date on that.
Thanks, Coach. Just before we wrap up here, because we're coming up on 5 o'clock, a few questions that have kind of overlapped what we've talked about. Work study. Your work study award will be intact for when campus does reopen, but the work study money has to be earned, and for that award, that's what that means. It has to be earned, and so those jobs necessarily aren't available while we are remote. But once we do come back, those work study hours will be available, and when they're available, we will hire work study jobs. And Coach Agan, do you want to clarify on that? Because I feel like I fumbled through that a little bit.
No, you got it. But yeah, again, if you will get your work study award, but you have to earn the money that comes with that award. It's not necessarily free money like a grant. So you need to find a job on campus, which, you know, under normal circumstances, we're able to employ most of our student athletes through a variety of jobs, either within their program, within their team, or as an athletic department. We have various job responsibilities over the course of the year that we're able to hire our student athletes for. Without that, without events and you know, some of those normal activities, we will have limited hours, at least as long as we're remote and as long as we're not having competition. So I encourage you guys to go find a job off campus if you really rely on those hours. Now, if we do come back on campus and we do have sporting events, then we will, and especially if we have a lot of sporting events in the spring, there'll be a lot of hours there for you. So we don't want to say dismiss it completely, but as of this moment, we will not have a lot of hours for our work study student athletes. One other thing that I know one of our coaches commented, wanted to make sure, and it's a good reminder, is just that your student athletes are in constant communication with their coaches. Make sure that they are communicating on their status for the fall, and just checking in regularly, reading emails from coaches, checking text messages from coaches, participating in team chats and virtual meetings, things like that, to get the most current information that's program specific. So I encourage you guys to do all of that.
Doug, you took the closing statement right out of my mouth there. For any more questions that you have that might not have been answered today, please do contact your coaches. If they don't know the answer, they can get to us, but Terry is regular in contact with them, and they're going to know pretty much just as much as he knows. As he gets that information, he will distribute it to them, and they will definitely get to you as soon as that information is available. Again, for residential life questions, we posted in the chat earlier. Email reslife@chapman.edu. That is an email that will get you a response on residence life questions as fast as possible. Doug, did you have something else?
No, I just forgot to unmute or to mute myself.
Stephen, I just want to say one thing in closing. To all, we know that this is not what your collegiate experience is supposed to be about, and we're heartbroken over what you're going through right now. And the only thing I can say is hang in there, and this thing's going to end eventually. We just don't know when, but we want to be here for you when that does happen, and we can't wait to see you guys in person. We do this because of student athletes, and we miss you being here on campus in person. So if there's ever any other questions you have, my information's on our website, the email, my phone number, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can to try to clarify anything. But we miss you, and we're hurting with you.
Thank you, Coach. And with that, we will call it an evening. Thank you for joining us today. This was recorded, and we will try to post it up on the website as soon as possible to get out to you guys in case you missed it, or in case your friends have any more questions that they missed. So thanks again for joining us. Everybody stay safe, and we hope to see you soon.